serve, but by serving. And finally, Christmas Day. This year we read from Matthew's Gospel. The first 25 verses of Matthew's Gospel make up this year's Christmas reading. The first 17 verses are the genealogy of Christ. And just when you threw all those names that you can't pronounce, that you've never heard of, you don't know what the connection is, you're not sure your pastor can pronounce, just when you're almost asleep, we quote the prophet. It says, "And the virgin shall conceive a child, and he shall be named Emmanuel," which means God is with us. First Sunday of Advent, beware that your hearts don't become drowsy from the anxieties of daily life. We realize, you know what? Our hearts have become drowsy from the anxieties of daily life. Second Sunday of Advent, repent, turn back to God, place God back at the center of your life. Third Sunday of Advent, don't just tell me, show me. Prove your love of God. The external proof of the internal mystery is love of neighbor. The fourth Sunday of Advent, when we switch the focus off self onto others, our lives become a dance for joy. And Christmas Day, we realize that we're living in the presence of God, that we're living His dream for us, that His will can be known, that His vision, that His hope, that His dream for you is that you become the best version of yourself. God doesn't want to control you. He doesn't want to manipulate you. He doesn't want to stifle you. He doesn't want to force you to do anything you don't want to do. God's dream for you is that you become the best version of yourself. And in the midst of all of that, the church takes us on a journey. Journey towards what? Journey towards the happiness that we want more than anything else. We all want to be happy. It's the common yearning of the human experience. It's the strongest yearning we have within us. I wonder why. I wonder why. Everyone has it, and it's our strongest yearning. Why? Because God gave it to us, and because He uses it as an eternal homing device. He creates us, and He puts this desire for happiness within us, and He sends us out into the universe knowing that the desire for happiness is so strong that sooner or later it'll bring us back to Him. So the church says to us, beware that your hearts don't become drowsy from the anxieties of daily life, because it'll rob you of the happiness that you desire more than anything else on the planet. There's genius in Catholicism. Sometimes we come to church, we just hear the one set of readings. Sometimes we need to step back and take a look at a month of readings or a season of readings, like we have done briefly here tonight. Happiness. We want to be happy. The great modern paradox is that you and I, we know the things that make us happy. We just don't do them. There are four aspects of the human person. I know some of you have read The Rhythm of Life. We talk about it extensively in The Rhythm of Life. The four aspects of the human person: physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. Now, physically, if you exercise regularly, and you eat the right sorts of food, and you sleep regularly, you're happier. Yes or yes? You feel more fully alive, you have a richer, more abundant experience of life. Emotionally, when you're focused in your relationships, when you give priority to your relationships, you're happier, you're healthier, you feel more fully alive, and you have a richer, more abundant experience of life. Intellectually, you take 10 minutes a day to read a good book. Not 2 hours, 10 minutes a day to read a good book. A book that challenges you to change and to grow and become the best version of yourself. What happens? Your vision of yourself expands. The way you see the world expands. You become more focused, more alert, more vibrant, more vital, and you have a richer, more abundant experience of life. You're healthier, you're happier, intellectually. And finally, spiritually. Spiritually, when we take a few minutes each day to step into the classroom of silence, to reimagine God's dream for us to become the best version of ourselves, we get reconnected with ourselves. We get reconnected with our God. What happens? Sense of peace, a sense of purpose, a sense of direction in our lives. We feel more fully alive, we're healthier, we're happier, and we have a richer, more abundant experience of life. Physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, in all of the four areas of the human person, you and I, we know the things that make us happy. We just don't do them. Oh, that can't be right. Let's start again. On one hand, we all want to be happy. On the other hand, we all know the things that make us happy, but we don't do those things. Oh, that can't be right. Let's start again. On one hand, we all want to be happy. On the other hand, we all know the things that make us happy, but we don't do those things. Why? Because we're too busy trying to be happy. And isn't it any wonder that God might want to come down, and does come down through his church, and shakes us and say, beware that your hearts don't become drowsy from the anxieties of daily life, because it'll rob you of the dream he has for you to become the best version of yourself, and of the happiness you desire more than anything else on the planet. So what are we doing? Physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. And why don't we do these things that make us happy? If we know that's where our happiness lies, we're too busy. We're too busy. Or at least that's the excuse we use, or give ourselves, or give others. Now, physically, we don't exercise regularly. Why? Too busy. We don't eat the right sorts of food. Why? Take too long to prepare. Too easy to go through the drive-thru. And we're too busy. We don't sleep regularly. Why? Because there's still only 24 hours in a day, isn't there? And our to-do lists just get longer and longer and longer and longer. We feel like our lives have a momentum of their own. We feel like our lives would go on with or without us. We never feel like we get caught up. We feel like we get more and more behind every day. I mean, when was the last time you sat down and said to yourself, I'm caught up now?
I need to sit down and do my taxes.
We don't sleep regularly because we're too busy. You know, we're rushing around last thing before we go to bed, doing 50 million things, telling ourselves, if I just get this ready, I'll be ready done for tomorrow. If I get these things done now, I'll be ready for tomorrow. We get to bed, we can't sleep. You're all wound up. You can't sleep. You lay there awake, think, I really need to get to sleep, but I can't get to sleep. Don't sleep regularly because we're too busy. Emotionally, every single person in this church knows the happiest people on the planet are the people who are focused in their relationships, the people who give priority to their relationships, and relationships thrive under one condition: carefree timelessness. Carefree timelessness. Gift any relationship in your life with carefree timelessness, it'll blossom, it'll bloom, it'll thrive. But we don't gift our relationships with carefree timelessness. We shove them into 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there and 2 minutes there and a phone call here and an internet message there, and we give them the worst time. When we're most exhausted, when we've got least to give, that's the time we give to our most important relationships. Why? Because we're too busy. Intellectually, we don't take those 10 minutes a day to read a good book that will challenge us to change and to grow and become the best version of ourselves. Why? Too busy. And spiritually, we don't take that time to pray, to reflect, to immerse ourselves in the classroom of silence, to get reconnected with ourselves, to get reconnected with our God. Why? Too busy. Physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, we know the things that make us happy. We just don't do them because we're too busy. Too busy doing what? I'll tell you. For the most part, it's because we're too busy doing just about everything that means just about nothing to just about nobody, just about anywhere, and will mean even less to anyone 100 years from now. Yeah, for the most part. And so the last Sunday of November, the church comes down to us, the first Sunday of Advent, and says, shakes us up a little and says, beware that your hearts don't become drowsy from the anxieties of daily life. And we realize, you know what? They have. They have. There's great genius in Catholicism. There's great beauty and great wisdom. And the more we embrace it, the more we realize that. The topic of this evening's talk is how to make New Year's resolutions that will change your life forever. We are done with the introduction now. How to make New Year's resolutions that will change. How many people, just a show of hands, how many people made New Year's resolutions last year or this year? How many people made New Year's resolutions this year?
Why is he talking about New Year's?
Gotcha.
Tomorrow's Easter.
Many. You're so sick of failing, you don't even make them anymore. I think there's an art to making successful resolutions in our lives. I think there's two keys. Number one, not to make too many. Number two, write them down, remind yourself of them in every waking moment of every hour of every single day. Place them at the center of your life. Make them a priority. You do those two things, you'll live successful resolutions. I'm going to suggest tonight that we make 4 New Year's resolutions, one in each of the 4 areas of life: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. And I'm going to suggest 4 for you. Maybe the 4 I suggest are no good for you. Go home tonight, work out what your 4 should be, Write them down on a piece of paper, stick them on your bathroom mirror where you brush your teeth. You'll see them twice a day. Put them on your screensaver in your computer, stick them on the inside of your planner, stick them on the dash of your car, put them wherever you have to put them. Remind yourself of them. Place them at the center of your life. Make them a priority. Your life will be very different next year than it was this year. I promise you, with absolute certainty. 4 New Year's resolutions that will change your life forever. Number 1, physical. Show of hands. How many people exercise once a week, every week, for the entire year this year with no exceptions? Once a week, every week for the entire year. 10%, maybe 15%. Excellent. How many people, another show of hands, believe that they would be happier next year if they exercised once a week, every week, for the entire year with no exceptions? Everyone. How many people believe they would have more energy? Well, let me ask you this. How many people would like to have more energy in their life? You like energy? I love energy. All of us, we'd all like to have more energy. How many people believe that they would have more energy next year if they exercised once a week, every week, for the entire year with no exceptions? Everyone. Energy, that's what it's about. I love energy. I don't need more cars, I don't need more clothes, I don't need more money. I need more energy. That's what I want. I want more energy. You know, I pray every day. I pray every day, God, give me more energy. It's true. I pray every day, God, give me more energy, because that's life. Your experience of life is only limited by the energy you have, and you're in control of most of it. Exercise once a week. First resolution, exercise once a week, every week for the entire year next year. Just decide what exercise is for you. For some people, exercise might be a 5-mile run. You know, for other people, exercise might be a walk around the block. Twice. You just got to decide what it is for you. Write it down. Make it a resolution. Place it at the center of your life. Give it a priority. Another show of hands. How many people here own $1 million racehorse? Nobody. I was in Louisville last week. No one had one there either. All right, that's okay. Imagine you owned $1 million racehorse. If you owned $1 million racehorse, would you let your racehorse go to McDonald's? Of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't disrespect your $1 million racehorse by taking it to McDonald's. But you and I, Temple of the Holy Spirit, straight through the drive-thru. Yeah, I'll have 2 sausage McMuffins and 4 hash browns and a large Coke, and it's 10:27. Is it? It's 10:27. Any chance the fries are ready? Any chance the fries are down? I realize, ma'am, breakfast is till 10:30, but any chance we can get some fries a little bit early? 4 New Year's resolutions that will change your life forever. Number 1, exercise once a week, every week, the entire year, no exception. Number 2, emotional. Just a show of hands. How many people have had serious, carefree timelessness once a month, every month, for this entire year with the most significant person in their life? I mean serious carefree timelessness. I mean vacation quality carefree timelessness. How many people?
He's like begging his wife for some quality time.
Of course it is. Of course it is. You see, we all know the people, the happiest people on the planet are the people who have rich relationship lives. Relationships thrive under one condition: carefree timelessness. Gift any relationship in your life with carefree timelessness, it'll blossom, it'll bloom. It doesn't matter, spouse, your kids, your siblings, your friends, your colleagues, your God. Whatever relationships you gift with carefree timelessness will blossom in your life. It's the reason young people fall in love so easily, and the reason the rest of us fall out of love so easily. Teenagers, great example. Perfect example. Teenagers. What do teenagers do? They talk on the phone, yes or yes? How long do they talk on the phone for? Forever. So Johnny's on the phone for 4 hours. Johnny gets off the phone, he said to Johnny, "Johnny, who are you talking to?" Johnny says, "Susan." Susan is Johnny's girlfriend. You say to Johnny, "Johnny, what did you guys talk about?"
Nothing.
What does Johnny say? Carefree timelessness. Whatever relationships you gift with carefree timelessness in your life will blossom. Whatever relationships you starve of carefree timelessness in your life will wither and die. The essential ingredient of healthy relationships, carefree timelessness. Resolution number 2, once a month, serious, carefree timelessness with the most significant person in your life next year. How are you going to do it? You've got to sit down on the first of the month. You've got to say, when are we going to do it this month? What day? What time? When's it going to be? Block off an afternoon, block off a morning, block off a day, block off an evening, call a babysitter, do whatever you've got to do. But make it happen.
I feel like this is like what his therapist told him about.
Resolution number 3. Resolution number 1.
Like,
physical. Exercise once a week.
Them,
resolution number 2. Emotional. Carefree timelessness once a month.
That's something therapists
resolution number 3. Intellectual. Books. Books change our lives. Books.
Yeah, books are good.
Change our lives. Because what we read today walks and talks with us tomorrow. What we read today forms the tomorrow of our lives. The ideas we put into our hearts and our minds create the actions of our ongoing lives. Books change our lives. You say to people, what was the most difficult time in your life? What was the most critical time in your life? They'll say, you know what, 6 years ago I had this situation. I was down, I was discouraged, I was confused, I was in a transition, I was in a transformation. I didn't realize it at the time, but now I realize it was a great time in my life. You say to them, what were you reading then? Their eyes will light up. They'll say, that book changed my life. You should read that book. Books change our lives. If you want to understand history, you only have to know one thing, and that is this. We become the stories we listen to. You want to understand any period in history? Just ask 2 questions. Who were the storytellers, and what story were they telling? You understand who the storytellers were and what story they were telling, you understand why the people's lives became the way they did. People look at America, they say, America's changed in the last 25 years. Why? We become the stories we listen to. You look at the stories, you look at how the stories have changed in the last 25 years here in America, and you understand why America has changed in the last 25 years. We become the stories we listen to. And that's why when our children know more about Harry Potter and Britney Spears than they do about Jesus Christ, we've got cause for concern.
He's got beef with Harry Potter and Britney Spears.
Movies or music or books or magazines or television or politicians or friends. It doesn't matter where we hear the story. Books change our lives. Read good books. Get good books. Collect good books. Teach your children to read good books. Teach your children to develop good collections of books. Books change our lives. You know, in the room at home where I write, I've got more than 2,000 books. But on the top of one bookshelf, on the top shelf of one of my bookshelves, I got 37 books. And every single one of those 37 books has deeply impacted my life. So when I get in a time where I'm discouraged, confused, a little down, I go to the bookshelf.
Is this an ad for books?
I can always, in a moment, pinpoint the book I need at that time, revisit it, and rediscover the way that book transformed my life. Books change our lives. New Year's resolution number 3, 10 minutes a day, every day, next year, with a good book.
10 minutes a day,
every day,
every day,
with a good book. How do you judge a good book?
Okay.
How do you know what makes a good book? Everything makes sense in relation to the fundamental principle. What is God's dream for you? That you become the best version of yourself. Yes. Everything makes sense in relation to this fundamental principle. So how do you judge a good book? Well, when you're done reading it, you ask yourself, did that book help me become a better version of myself? Every experience of life can be understood in relation to the fundamental principle that God has created you, He has a dream for you, He has a vision for you, and it is that you become the best version of yourself. And once we understand that fundamental principle and place it at the center of our life, everything makes sense. And everything can be understood and evaluated in relation to that fundamental principle. What makes a good book? Books that challenge us to change and grow and become the best version of ourselves. Get books like that, read books like that, 10 minutes a day, every day, next year.
Okay.
If you don't know what to read, jump on the internet tomorrow. Go to our website, MatthewKelly.org. There's a little button that says Contact the Foundation. Hit that little button. Then there's another little button that says Email Matthew. Hit that little button. Send me an email and say, I want the list of books. I'll send you a list of 10 books to get started with. It's not a list of 10 Matthew Kelly books. You get started with those ones first. Books change our lives. I believe that with my whole heart. You know, I've been traveling now for 10 years, speaking, and it's a phenomenal privilege to do what I do. One that I will never completely understand myself. And in the past 10 years, I've had the honor to travel in 50 countries. I've had the privilege to travel in all 50 states of your great country.
Wow, that's impressive.
And wherever I go, ever since from the beginning, people would say to me, this is great, good message. The young people need to hear this message. We've got to get you into high schools. They need to hear this. And so I started speaking in high schools during the day when I would visit different cities. And you see the kids, their eyes, they light up. You see they get it. You see it makes sense to them. You see it's a new option, a different option, an alternative route to what the world's offering. You see they like it and they understand it and they want it. But it's like you're just dropping a drop in the ocean. And what I realized was they needed something tangible. Now, 5 years ago, we launched a project called the Schools Project. And now every time I go into a high school, all the kids get free books. Every kid gets free books. This year in America alone, we gave more than 25,000 high school students free copies of The Rhythm of Life. And then you get the emails and you get the letters. I got one, a couple of weeks ago from a girl who heard me speak when she was a senior in high school. She's now just graduated college. She got this book 4 years ago. She put it on a shelf. She's graduated college. She doesn't know what to do with her life. In May, she's read this book. She sends me this email. Books change our lives. New Year's resolution number 3, get good books, collect good books, read good books, 10 minutes a day, every day next year.
All right.
New Year's resolution number 4. I thought we'd talk a little bit about the Mass. I can see that you are exuding all sorts of enthusiasm at the prospect. What is the most common thing we hear said about the Mass? Boring. Too long, second. And number 3 is, I don't get anything out of it. It's boring, but boring is the theme of our comment about the Mass for the last 25 years at least. Been hearing it from children for generations. The disturbing reality in modern Catholicism is that we're hearing it from more and more adults. And their kids come to them and say, Mom, Dad, do we have to go to church? Church is boring. More and more adults, parents are thinking to themselves, you know what, kid? You're right. Mass is boring. And we're going to go together and be bored. It's a family tradition. But our experience of the Mass is the central experience of Catholicism. For 1.2 billion, with a B, Catholics on the planet, and 70 million Catholics in America, the Mass is the central experience. And when our most common commentary about our central experience of our faith, which is meant to be the center of our lives, is that it's boring, surely it's time we reopen the discussion in a new and different way. Surely it's time we began to think about it. It's not a problem that popped up yesterday. Surely it's time we open the conversation, the dialogue, in a new and exciting way. But before we do, let's begin by recapping on our last 25 years of dialogue about the Mass. The problem with the Mass, well, it's the music. I mean, clearly it's the music. That's the problem with the Mass. It's too old-fashioned. No, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the music's too modern. No, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass, the music, it's too loud. No, it's not that it's too loud. It's too soft in some places, and it's too loud in some places. They just need to get it right. That's the problem. No, it's not the music. The music's not the problem. The problem is the cantor. She can't sing. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the kneelers. We've got to get rid of those kneelers. It's too old-fashioned. Let's get rid of those kneelers. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The kneelers are fine. If we could just get those nice, soft, padded, cushion kneelers, that's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the readers. They read too fast or they read too slow. It's half of them. They can't even pronounce half the words, and the other half of them, they can't see over the pulpit. That's the problem with the Mass, those readers. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the statues. Too old-fashioned. Let's get rid of those statues. That's the problem with the Mass. No, the statues can stay. It's just that the statues, they're too big. They're too old-fashioned. We need smaller, modern statues. That's the problem with the Mass. No, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the Eucharistic ministers. Who chose them to be Eucharistic ministers? And what were they thinking? It must be a volunteer position. Nobody would pick those people to be Eucharistic ministers. That's the problem with the Mass. No, that's not the problem with the Mass. They can be Eucharistic ministers, but maybe, just maybe, we should give them a lesson in how to dress before they become Eucharistic ministers. That's the problem with the Mass. No, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the priest. He's too old. No, ours is too young. No, that's not the problem. The problem is when they're talking, they're like philosophizing, theologizing. It's up in the clouds. It's above our heads. It doesn't relate to our everyday life. We need the collection, the modern relevance. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem at our church. The problem at our church is the priest. He just comes down. He just talks to the kids. And the kids love that. And the kids love him. But we adults, we need to be fed too. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is we need a bigger church, a newer church, a more modern church. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the coffee after Mass. Where do they get that stuff? I mean, you could drink motor oil, it would taste better. That's the problem with the Mass. No, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass, and on and on and on and on and on. And the problem, let me tell you, is not out there. 100 years from now, we will discover that the most powerful movement of the 20th and 21st century was the abdication of responsibility. It has reached into every experience of human life. The church is no exception, and the Mass is a classic example. We keep putting the problem out there. We keep abdicating responsibility for the problem, because while the problem's out there, we don't have to change anything in here. And the problem, let me promise you, is not out there. I think most of us would like to have a richer experience of the Mass on a Sunday. So how do we do it, and where do we start? When you come through those doors next Sunday, just ask this one question. God, show me one way in this Mass I can become a better person this week. And then listen to the music, to the prayers, to the readings, to the priest speaking, to the quiet of your heart, and find that one thing. Better than that, go out tomorrow and buy yourself a brand new journal. Bring it home, write down in the front cover, God, show me one way in this Mass I can become a better person this week. And next Sunday, bring it to church with you. And then on the next page, on its own page, write down the one thing. Not 6 pages of scribbling notes, one thing on its own page. You do that every Sunday for a year. In that journal, you will have the most powerful spiritual resource you cannot even begin to imagine. You can take that journal to your quiet time each day. You can flip through it. You can say, how am I doing in that one? Good. How am I doing in that one? Not so good. How am I doing in that one? Ooh, forgot about that one. If you believed that God was going to show up at a certain place on a certain time and speak to you, would you go? Of course you would. And would you bring pen and paper, or would you just rely on your memory? Yeah, you'd bring pen and paper, wouldn't you? If you didn't bring pen and paper to church last week, then I got to believe that you didn't believe that God was going to speak to you at church last Sunday or the week before that. And he did. What did he say? He said, beware that your hearts don't become drowsy from the anxieties of daily life. He said, repent, turn back to God, place God back at the center of your life, reimagine, re-envision his dream for you to become the best version of yourself. God is speaking to us all the time. We just don't listen. Do that every Sunday for a year. Your whole experience of Mass and church and Catholicism and spirituality and yourself and the world will change. That one thing. Why? Because our lives change when our habits change. It's not freak luck, and God doesn't have any favorites. But I'll tell you what will happen. Because, you know, human behavior is so predictable. Now, we all think we're acting spontaneous all the time, you know? But it's become so predictable. It's become so out of hand in our modern society. It's like, if you want to be different, stand in line, you know? You'll all go out tomorrow and buy your new journals, won't you? Of Of course you will. Why? Because we love buying stuff.
Yeah. Consumers.
And you bring your new journal home, and you'll open the front cover, and the first page you will write, God, show me one way in this Mass I can become a better person this week. How will you write it? You'll write it really neatly, won't you? Why? Because we start everything really neatly, don't we? Then you'll bring it to church next Sunday. You'll be so excited. Got your journal. You'll actually be in the pew before the music starts. I know it's a novel idea. You'll actually be in the pew before the priest gets to the altar. You'll sit down and you open your journal. You look at this question. You'll say to God, God, just show me one way in this Mass I can become a better person this week. Then you'll listen. You'll listen to the music. You'll listen to prayers. You'll listen to the readings. You'll listen to the priest's homily. And you'll listen to the quiet of your heart. And God will speak to you. He'll give you that one thing. And you'll write that one thing down. Not 5 things. One thing. You resist the temptation. You'll write down just one thing on its own page. Trust me, one thing is about the most we can handle each week. And you'll write it down, and you'll go home from church on Sunday, and you'll be so excited. You'll be energetic. You'll be enthusiastic. You'll be passionate. You've just had an experience of Mass different to any experience of Mass you can remember in the foreseeable past. And you'll think to yourself, was it really that easy? And it was. And then you'll promise yourself, I am going to do this every Sunday for the rest of my life. This idea, this one little simple habit transforms my whole experience of the Mass. And then you say to yourself, but this journal, this is personal. I don't want anyone else to read this journal. You'll say to yourself, I better find a safe place for this journal. I better find a place to put this journal where nobody will find it. Oh, and you do. Oh, yeah. You say to yourself, oh, I know the perfect place. I'll take it over and I'll put it in that drawer. Take it over, you put it in the drawer. Drawer hasn't been opened in 20 years, but you covered it up with a few things just in case someone does open the drawer. You think, it'll be safe there. 3 years from next Sunday, you open that drawer, you look at that journal, you think, there's that journal. You pick up the journal, you think to yourself, oh, I wonder how long it's been in there. It's been a while, and then you open the journal, you flip through it, you say to yourself, I've only used 2 pages of this journal. It's a good journal. I rip out those 2 pages, I use it for something else.
Yeah.
You know you will. Human behavior, phenomenally predictable. Our lives change when our habits change. What's the difference between the heroes, leaders, legends, champions, and saints that fill the history books? They just had better habits. What are your habits? Are they helping you become the best version of yourself? Or are they self-destructive? 4 New Year's resolutions that will change your life forever. Number 1, physical, exercise once a week. Number 2, emotional, carefree timelessness once a month. Number 3, intellectual, 10 minutes a day, every day, with a good book that challenges you to change and to grow and become the best version of yourself. Number 4, spiritual. Get yourself a journal. Bring it to Mass every Sunday. Write the one thing down. You do those 4 things, you can't even imagine your life next year. More happiness, more energy, more passion, more enthusiasm. So where do we go? Where do we start? Just got to start choosing happiness. You want to be happy? I want to be happy. We just got to start choosing happiness, because 90% of the happiness and 90% of the misery in our lives, we choose for ourselves. Now, any day next week you're going to come home, it's going to be a day to work out. And guess what? You're not going to feel like working out, are you now? No, because let's face it, how often do you feel like working out. It doesn't happen that often. If you only ever worked out when you felt like working out, how often would you work out? Not very often. If you only ever prayed when you felt like praying, how often would you pray? Not very often. If you only read good books that challenge you to change and grow and become the best version of yourself, when you felt like reading good books that challenge you to change and grow and become the best version of yourself, how often would you read those books? Not very often. If you only ever came to church when you felt like coming to church, how often would you come to church? Twice a year. Christmas and Easter, with all of those other people who feel like coming to church at Christmas and Easter. Haven't you ever noticed the place is always packed at Christmas and Easter?
Yeah.
Why? Because they feel like coming to church at Christmas and Easter. And the modern world, the modern culture tells you, you judge an activity by how you feel when it begins. And that's a lie. You judge an activity by what it produces when you're done.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I hardly ever feel like working out. But when I'm done working out, I'm always glad I did. I hardly ever feel like praying. But when I'm done praying, I'm always glad I did. I hardly ever feel like reading those books that challenge me to change and grow and become the best version of myself. But when I'm done, I'm always glad I did. I hardly ever feel like coming to church. But once I'm done, I'm always glad I did. So you come home from work one day next week, you don't really feel like working out, but it's your day to work out, so two roads diverge in the yellow wood of your life. You've got to make a choice. You've got to make a decision. You've got to assess the options. Are you going to work out? Or are you going to sit in front of the idiot box with a 300-ounce bag of potato chips and a six-pack of beer? It's your choice. Are you going to choose happiness or are you going to choose misery? And how do you judge happiness and how do you judge misery? Which of those two options is going to help you become the best version of yourself? And then choose that option. Start choosing the best version of yourself. As soon as you start choosing the best version of yourself, you'll start choosing happiness. The more you choose the best version of yourself, the happier you'll be. You want to be happy? I want to be happy. Common yearning of the human experience. The church says, here's the answer to happiness. Here's the model, the map to happiness, is strive to become the best version of yourself. It's also God's dream for you. It's also what you were created for. It's also what you are put here for. It's also the meaning and purpose of life. It's the fundamental principle. And once you understand it, everything makes sense. And until you understand it, nothing makes sense. So place it at the center of your life and start to live around this fundamental principle. God, He doesn't want to control you. He doesn't want to manipulate you. He doesn't want to stifle you. He doesn't want to force you to do anything you don't want to do. In fact, quite the opposite. God will let you do anything you want to do. Whenever you want to do it. I mean, when was the last time God came down and stopped you from doing something? When was the last time God came down and forced you to do something? The modern world portrays God in this light, but it's a lie. God will let you do whatever you want, wherever you want, with whoever you want, as often as you want. He is not the slightest bit interested in forcing you to do anything you don't want to do. But if you turn to God and you say, God, what do you want from me? What's your dream for me? He will tell you that He wants you to become the best version of yourself. That's God's dream for you. Embrace that dream. Embrace the dream. Good night.